She realized that, even in the deepest darkness and despair, human kindness could flourish, and that life still held purposes for her, purposes greater than her own pain. She would not be a passive victim of others' cruelty. She would fight for herself, for her dignity, and for all the others who might be suffering at the hands of people as cruel and unscrupulous as Mark and Claire. Sarah's recovery was a slow and painful process, both physically and emotionally, a true test of her resilience. The overwhelming trauma of betrayal and near-death haunted her in recurring nightmares, making nights a torment of memories and fears. But against all odds, the unconditional support of Grandma Martha and the unexpected, yet profound, friendship of Ethan became her foundation, the safe haven where she could recompose herself and find the strength to move forward. Grandma Martha, a wise and experienced woman, with eyes that conveyed serenity and understanding, listened to Sarah with infinite patience, offering words of comfort and encouragement that healed her soul and calmed her spirit. Sarah found in sewing, her old and beloved passion, not just an escape from pain and a way to occupy her hands and mind, but also a powerful way to restart her life, a thread connecting her to her former self, but now stronger. Her nimble fingers, once trembling with fear and pain, now transformed simple fabric scraps into beautiful and vibrant pieces, each stitch sewn with renewed determination. Quickly, her creations gained renown in the small, welcoming village, and Sarah became a reference for good taste, skill, and, above all, resilience, with local women seeking her advice, her ideas, and, of course, her unique, soulfully crafted, artisanal works. Ethan's attachment to Sarah was palpable, a deep and instinctive connection. As if the boy's soul had found its lost half, he followed her everywhere, fascinated by her skill with needle and thread, and by the light that she, even wounded and recovering, brought into his grandmother's house, illuminating the darkest corners of his own heart. Sarah, in turn, also became deeply attached to the boy who, for her, was a true hero, pulling her from the swamp at the most desperate moment of her life. His presence filled a void in her heart that she didn't even know existed, a void that the pain of betrayal had made even sharper. Ethan brought back the joy and innocence that Sarah thought she had lost. Even Buddy, Ethan's loyal dog, seemed to have chosen Sarah as his new favorite, lying peacefully at her feet as she sewed, like a silent, furry guardian. David, Ethan's father, observed the scene with a complex mixture of apprehension, given the fragility of his son's heart, which had already suffered so much, and a growing gratitude for this woman who brought so much joy, peace, and hope to his family. Initially, he feared that his son's strong attachment to Sarah might lead to another disappointment for the boy should she leave, but Sarah's dedication and affection for Ethan and Grandma Martha, along with her strength, resilience, and the light that had returned to her eyes, began to melt his initial distrust. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, a genuine and deep sense of affection began to grow between David and Sarah, built on mutual respect, admiration for each other's strength, and, most importantly, their shared love for young Ethan, who was the strongest link between them. One day, while tidying her few belongings that had been recovered from the incident, Sarah found the small waterproof card she had kept in her coat pocket that fateful afternoon. It was a business card for a private investigator, Christine, whom she had briefly met at a social event a few months prior. On that occasion, Christine had told her something enigmatic about marital fraud investigations, words Sarah had dismissed at the time, absorbed in her own illusory happiness. Now, a spark of curiosity, combined with a strong intuition, ignited in her mind, like a lighthouse in the darkness. Could there be something deeper behind Mark's sudden disappearance and Claire's betrayal than mere infidelity? Driven by a thirst for justice that grew and propelled her forward each day, a fire burning in her chest, Sarah decided to seek out Christine. David, sensing the seriousness of her quest and feeling the weight of the decision she carried, immediately offered to accompany her, a gesture of support Sarah accepted with deep gratitude. Reluctantly, Sarah shared her story with the detective, omitting, due to lingering shame and trauma, the most shocking details of the attempted murder in the swamp, but emphasizing Mark's coldness and sudden disappearance after the betrayal incident, which now seemed planned. Christine, a perceptive woman with a penetrating gaze and a razor-sharp intuition, listened intently to Sarah's every word, catching nuances and inconsistencies. Something in the narrative deeply intrigued her, a feeling that there was much more behind the superficial facts Sarah presented. She took the case, initially classifying it as a missing person investigation, but with a premonition of something larger. The discoveries that followed were shocking and revealing, uncovering a truth far crueler than Sarah could have imagined. Mark was not just a cold, calculating adulterer. He was an experienced swindler, a predator who operated with cunning and ruthlessness. Along with Claire, his accomplice and lover, he had built an intricate web of financial frauds, perpetrating elaborate schemes on various innocent people, faking lucrative investments that never existed only to steal his victims' hard-earned money. Sarah, upon discovering the scale and cruelty of the frauds, felt doubly betrayed and humiliated, a blow as devastating as the first. It was David who supported her in that moment of despair and revelation, offering her a shoulder to cry on and words of strength that kept her from completely collapsing. The romantic outing in the swamp, in fact, was part of a macabre and devilish plan to fake Sarah's death and, thus, inherit her assets, which would be used to cover Mark's growing debts and finance the criminal couple's escape to a new paradise of luxury and impunity. Sarah's small card, which she had kept on an inexplicable impulse, without knowing why, became the crucial piece to dismantle the complex web of crimes. Christine, with her dedicated and meticulous team, gathered irrefutable evidence of the frauds and Mark's cruel plan. They discovered that other women had been victims of similar schemes, abandoned and robbed by him, revealing a pattern of cruelty and exploitation that spanned years. Aster's ensuing trial was a turning point, a moment of catharsis and justice for Sarah and the other victims who would finally have a voice. The detailed evidence of the frauds, meticulously presented by Christine, the emotional and courageous testimonies of the other defrauded women, and the cold, calculating description of Mark's plan to get rid of Sarah shocked everyone present in the courtroom, who listened in stunned silence. The mask of a charming, successful, and above suspicion man that Mark had so desperately tried to maintain fell completely, revealing the face of a cruel, ambitious, and utterly remorseless criminal. Mark had built a sophisticated and perverse web of deceit, manipulating and extorting his victims with terrifying skill, leaving a trail of misery and bankruptcy wherever he went. His coldness in describing the attempted murder of Sarah sent chills down everyone's spines in the room, showing the depth of his moral depravity. Aster's Claire, once an arrogant and manipulative figure who exuded false superiority, crumbled under the overwhelming weight of the accusations, but too many's disappointment. Without any sign of genuine remorse, her greed and selfishness were blatant in every word, in every desperate gesture of self-justification. In a final, pathetic act, she attempted a forced reconciliation with Sarah in the courthouse hallways, whispering an empty and rehearsed "Sister, please forgive me," devoid of any true emotion, merely seeking leniency in her sentence. Sarah had held high and with a steely gaze, yet filled with dignity and inner strength, stopped her coldly with a firm voice that left no room for doubt. "You are not my sister. You are a criminal who allied herself with a monster. Save your apologies for the judge. They do not interest me, nor do they affect me any longer." The sentence was harsh and just. Years in prison for both, a deserved punishment for their crimes and the pain they caused. Justice, though delayed and hard-won, had been served, and a sense of relief washed over Sarah's soul. For her, the conviction of her aggressors did not bring exuberant or vengeful joy, but a profound sense of relief and a definitive end to a painful and traumatic chapter in her life. She did not allow herself to gloat over others' misfortune, but found satisfaction and peace in knowing that Mark and Claire could no longer harm other innocent people. The canoe swayed precariously in the swamp, a scene straight out of a nightmare painted with shades of darkness and despair. The damp, heavy air, almost dense in its oppression, carried not just the acrid scent of wet earth and decaying vegetation, but also the premonition of an even darker evil pressing against Sarah's chest. She gripped the edge of the precarious craft, her knuckles white, almost lifeless, from clenching so tightly. Her heart, which once overflowed with a naive and complete love for Mark, her husband, was now a knot of icy terror, pulsing in her chest like a hurried drum, announcing an imminent tragedy. He had brought her to that isolated place, a corner forgotten by civilization and hope, under the sweet and treacherous promise of a romantic outing, a moment just for them, but his eyes, once filled with a tenderness she believed to be true, now gleamed with a sharp, inhuman coldness, and the shovel he held in his sturdy hands told a much more nefarious story than any nightmare could conjure. "Mark, what are you going to do?" she whispered, her voice choked and almost inaudible, muffled by tears that had long since abandoned any control, streaming freely down her face. The answer came wordlessly, a brusque, violent shove that sent her tumbling out of the canoe, directly into the dark, fetid water, so cold it seemed to freeze her veins and paralyze her soul. He didn't just want to get rid of her. He wanted to erase her, silence her forever, as if her existence had never been and her name had never been spoken. As the muddy darkness swallowed her, dragging her into the depths, a single image flickered in her mind, more painful than the icy water itself, the knowing smile of her sister, Claire, the traitor who had allied herself with her tormentor, weaving the fabric of her own ruin. Sarah sank, hope draining from her lungs like the last air bubbles on the murky surface. But fate, with its intricate web of invisible and unpredictable threads, had other plans for her, plans that Mark and Claire, in their blindness and arrogance, could never conceive. A small waterproof card, a piece of paper she didn't even remember having in her coat pocket, would be the key to unraveling a complex web of secrets, lies, and crimes, and, surprisingly, save not only Sarah from her own abyss, but countless other families from similar cruelty. Sarah, in her early 30s, was a woman of natural talent and a generous heart. She grew up in a humble but loving family where she learned the value of hard work and integrity. From childhood, she showed an unparalleled skill for sewing. Her nimble fingers transformed simple fabrics into true works of art, and she dreamed of having her own studio. Her younger sister, Claire, had always been her opposite, envious, ambitious, and with a disproportionate sense of entitlement. Although Sarah always treated her with kindness and generosity, Claire harbored a deep jealousy of her sister's talent, the attention she received, and the ease with which Sarah won people's sympathy. This envy manifested itself in small digs and derogatory comments disguised as jokes. Sarah met Mark at a modest charity event in the small town where she lived. He stood out in the crowd with his elegant posture, his penetrating gaze, and an undeniable charm capable of captivating anyone. As a real estate agent, he possessed fluent and convincing rhetoric and an attentive manner that seemed genuinely dedicated, making her feel like the center of his universe. He courted her with the delicacy of a poet, sending flowers daily, planning romantic candlelight dinners in charming restaurants, and engaging in deep conversations that seemed to touch Sarah's soul, revealing her deepest dreams and fears. Mark showed a sincere interest in Sarah's dreams and values, making her feel understood and valued like never before. She, with her pure heart and dreaming soul, found herself completely enchanted by Mark's apparent kindness and keen intelligence. He spoke of the future with a conviction that seduced her, of building a life together, of having children who would run through a home filled with love, laughter, and prosperity. Mark seemed like the ideal man, the perfect answer to her prayers for a loyal, dedicated partner who would love her unconditionally, a true safe harbor. Together, they built a life that, to the outside world, seemed like a modern fairy tale worthy of envy. Sarah, with her innate talent for sewing, set up a small, cozy home studio where she created unique pieces that quickly won over local clients and even those from neighboring towns. Mark, with his fluent speech, his penetrating gaze, and an apparent work ethic, seemed to thrive in the competitive real estate market, always with new deals and grand plans, which reinforced the image of a successful couple they projected. They were an admired couple in the community, an example of love, dedication, and success. Family was the foundation of everything, their most precious asset, and loyalty, an unnegotiable value, the unshakable pillar of their union. Never, in her darkest thoughts or worst nightmares, did Sarah imagine the perfidy silently creeping beneath the veneer of that perfect normalcy. She cherished so deeply the first signs that something was wrong were subtle, almost imperceptible, like shadows lengthening at dusk, announcing the arrival of darkness, whispered phone calls at odd hours, text messages hastily deleted from his phone, a gradual distancing from Mark, who spent more time away from home, and a growing coldness in his touches and gazes, which once were filled with passion. Sarah, with the keen intuition of a wife who knows every curve of her partner's soul, felt the abyss slowly opening between them, but refused, in an act of painful denial, to see the depth of the betrayal unfolding right before her eyes. Hope was a stubborn thing until the day the veil of illusion brutally tore, and the truth imposed itself. She found the letters, the fervent and forbidden words of Claire, her own sister, revealing an extramarital affair that had been going on for months, weaving a complex web of deceit, manipulation, and unprecedented cruelty. The pain hit her like a physical blow, a shockwave that left her breathless, her body trembling uncontrollably. The humiliation burned in her gut, like a corrosive fire consuming her from within. Mark, confronted with the irrefutable evidence of his infidelity and duplicity, didn't even bother to deny it. His coldness cut Sarah deeper than any scream, any curse could have done. He saw her simply as an obstacle, a nuisance to be removed so that his new life with Claire could flourish unimpeded. And on that fateful afternoon, in the dark, forgotten swamp, he tried to brutally and definitively end her existence, erasing her from the map. The shock of the cold, muddy water, the feeling of imminent suffocation, awakened a primal fury in Sarah, a survival instinct she didn't know she possessed. Her lungs burned in desperate search of air, but she fought with all her might against the treacherous swamp current, desperately clinging to aerial roots and slippery vines that emerged from the dark water. The darkness seemed to swallow every last shred of hope, threatening to consume her completely, dragging her into an abyss of despair. But then, a distant bark, faint, hesitant, but unmistakable, broke the oppressive silence of the swamp, and soon after, the child's voice, calling with a touching innocence that seemed like a miracle. It was Ethan, a boy with large, sad, but curious eyes, exploring the swamp's edge with his stray dog, Buddy, his faithful shadow. Ethan lived nearby with his grandmother, Martha, a kind-hearted woman with hands that knew the value of affection, who raised him with love and dedication since his mother's untimely passing. A sudden illness that left an immense void and a deep, constant longing in the boy's heart. His father, David, Martha's son, was a good and gentle man with a tired but determined face, who worked tirelessly on surrounding farms, enduring the scorching sun, the biting cold, and physical exhaustion, to provide a modest but dignified living for his mother and son. He worried deeply about Ethan, who still keenly missed his mother and desperately sought a female figure to bond with, and feared that the boy, in his search for affection, might attach himself to people who could, in some way, cause him new disappointments or abandonment. Ethan and Buddy, with their innocent curiosity and innate loyalty, saw Sarah, exhausted and covered in mud, almost lifeless, at the edge of the swamp. The pure innocence in the boy's eyes and Buddy's affectionate lick were like a ray of sunshine, breaking through the densest darkness, bringing a glimpse of light to Sarah's tormented soul. Ethan, despite his natural fear of the mysterious and injured figure, ran as fast as his small legs could carry him to call his grandmother. Martha, upon hearing Sarah's confused and desperate story, told with her grandson's genuine emotion, did not hesitate for a second to offer her shelter, warmth, and care. Guided by her deep faith in human goodness, little Ethan, who lived in a world of silence and longing for his mother, a world where joy seemed to have hidden itself, found in Sarah a figure who, though wounded and fragile, exuded a vital force and a kindness that irresistibly drew him in. He bonded with her with an intensity that surprised everyone, seeing in her the unexpected heroine that fate, somehow, had sent to bring light into his life. For Sarah, the fragility and trauma of that horrific day were still present. The pain, a constant companion, but the presence of the boy, who had saved her from certain death and offered her pure affection, brought an unexpected seed of hope. Sarah's true victory, however, was not the punishment of her aggressors, but her own transformation, her complete rebirth. She rebuilt her life with impressive resilience and unwavering strength, finding a new and meaningful purpose in helping other victims of domestic violence and fraud. Her sewing workshop thrived even more, driven not only by the impeccable quality of her work, but by the inspiration she represented to the community. Sarah began offering free courses to vulnerable women, teaching them not only a new profession and a means of livelihood, but also empowering them to become independent and rebuild their own lives, just as she had done. Ethan's affection and Christine's sincere and loyal friendship transformed into an unbreakable family bond, a safe and trusting haven for Sarah, where she could truly be herself and love, which Sarah thought she had lost forever in the dark and treacherous waters of the swamp, found a new and luminous path in her heart. The genuine kindness, impeccable integrity, and unconditional support of David, Ethan's father, made her envision a future that once seemed impossible, a future filled with affection, companionship, and peace. Sarah and David married in a simple but meaningful and loving ceremony, surrounded by those who loved them, forming a beautiful and honorable family with Ethan and Grandma Martha, and of course, the adorable Buddy, who celebrated with joyful barks and wagging tail. The murky swamp, the place of her near end, became a distant memory, a scar that, though present, no longer defined her existence. In its place, a lush garden of hope, resilience, and love blossomed, transforming not only Sarah's life, who found true happiness and a new purpose, but also Ethan's, who finally found the maternal figure he had so deeply missed, Grandma Martha's, who saw her son and grandson find the fullness of happiness, and David's, who discovered true love in a complete, united family. Karma, the universal justice that often seems invisible and distant, had acted in mysterious and surprising ways, transforming tragedy into an inspiring testament to the human capacity to overcome the deepest darkness and be reborn even stronger, wiser, and more full of love. Sarah's story reminds us that, even in the darkest and most desperate moments of life, hope can emerge from where we least expect it, like a flower blooming amidst rocks, defying adversity. That betrayal and evil, however painful they may be, do not have the last word, and that the resilience of the human spirit is capable of flourishing, even in the most arid soil of adversity, transforming pain into strength. Have you ever felt betrayed or wronged in your journey? How did you find the strength to move forward and rebuild your life, brick by brick? Do you believe that good always prevails in some way, even if it takes time to manifest? Share your story in the comments below, as your experience can inspire and strengthen others who are going through difficult times, showing them that light always returns. If this story touched your heart and brought you a message of hope and strength, click like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more emotional and inspiring stories like this one. Turn on notifications to be the first to receive our next videos and embark on new journeys with us. A big hug, and see you in the next story that will warm your soul.